Alright, here we go again. 20 years, 20 lessons, and hopefully less than 20 minutes. And so I'll only have so much time to explain each lesson. So if you ever find yourself being curious or want to hear more about a certain lesson, there will be Medium article versions of them, and there will be links down below. They should all be out by this video is released. And yeah, let's just get straight onto it, man. Happy birthday to me, I guess. Alright. Number 1, the importance of values and how to not be a bowling pin in life. And if I were to just put this simply, most people would put emphasis on very abstract things such as purpose, meaning, direction, and all that cliche stuff we see on posters. I'm talking about values in an applied, practical sense, and perhaps even in the very meaning of that word. Like, what do you value yourself? And especially for those coming into their teens, it's not like you have to have your entire life figured out. You just have to at least have a sense of what you deem to be significant to you. What would you do just for the sake of it? Like, you just know it matters to you inherently without question. As soon as I realized that, okay, I deem abstract cliche concepts such as friendship more valuable than, let's say, my academics, then flunking a test didn't feel as life-threatening as it did, say, a few years ago. Alright, number 2, very simple and practical. Do you guys ever feel like nothing gets done? And that's essentially the title of this second lesson. It never ends, okay? Whether it be your email inbox or your to-do list, whichever productivity management system you might have, it will always get filled up in some way, shape, or form tomorrow. It's like some sad little productivity hider, right? You cut off one head and like 2 grow in its place. This idea that we will be able to find the perfect morning routine or the ideal workflow in order for us to breeze through every task, whether it be academic or personal project, like it's nothing, that doesn't exist, because we just keep moving the goalpost anyway, okay? The more we feel like that we can squeeze every single second of our schedule, we will. It's like a rabbit hole. So, but as an hyper optimizer, as some people may call it, it really took me a lot of time to break out of this idea that, yeah, I can find the perfect Notion set up in order for me to get the most out of my day, or get everything done by 2 p.m. or, wake up at 3 a.m. and then have this, perfect life essentially. And behind every mountain is another mountain. And as annoying as that sounds, that might just be the privilege of being alive. It's part problem, part blessing. It will just keep throwing things at us, and it's not like we get everything done, because as soon as we do that, that's practically the same as being dead. Alright, number 3. This is, again, a very practical one. Poor me, bad them. How I would state it in the article, the 2 flavors of learned helplessness. Essentially, it's what I observe to be the type of mindsets in which people take up as like a defensive stance in order for them to stay the way they are. Either you say, poor me, or it's my fault, why nothing's changing, why this situation or circumstances of mine is hopeless is because, well, I suck, I cannot change, I'm hopeless, so on and so forth. Or bad them, you blame it on other people, you pin it on something external for us to be able to better our circumstances and ultimately ourselves. Blaming others and even yourself won't fix that. It's as if you're stalling, and most people would think that this is an optimal strategy, that this is progress, because you have an idea as to why things aren't going the way you expect them to be. Yeah, that sucks, but blaming yourself or others won't help you out of that situation. So yeah, we have to be aware as to whether we catch ourselves saying, oh, poor me, or, sorry for my language here, fuck me, or bad them, or like fuck them, and living life like that sounds very miserable. I might just have to read the transcript on this one, because this is making my head spin all over the place, and that's probably the lesson in a nutshell. Life does not make sense. I used to think that if I watched enough podcasts, read enough books, and did enough 4D quantum chess in my head, I could somehow skip ahead to wisdom. Look ahead to wisdom. That's a cubing reference. I'm so sorry, future homers. Turns out life doesn't work like that. Life is just one long game of fuck around and find out. It's basically data gathering for next time. You don't really know if the lesson sticks until reality starts grading it on paper. Different relationship, same insecurity. Different opportunity, same fear. Different year, same mistake. And It's not like I'm framing this as a bad thing. It's just that you're supposed to. Mistakes are bound to be repeated. Again, that's why some people, I do think that this is a classic advice for those entering into their 20s and perhaps even in their teens, that you should just fuck up as much as possible as early as possible. May not be our fault, but it is our responsibility to grow out of certain insecurities and fears and traumas or whatnot. Yeah, it will just keep reappearing in different chapters in our life. It just waits. Like, these lessons just wait around corners like a stiff neck or an earworm, as I would state here. Something you know is off, but convince yourself that life is still livable until life shows up around the next corner carrying a shotgun loaded with "I fucking told you so's." Because life doesn't care what you know, it cares what you embody. And until you embody that lesson, reality has infinite retakes. We ourselves are the only ones who have a front row seat to our own movies, right? And I do think that if you just think about it hard enough, you will be able to pick up certain themes and recurring plot lines regardless of which chapter we are in. So it's best to be aware of them. Okay, set your mind apart. I'm gonna say it flat out now. This is probably one of the more cliche ones in this list, but they're very important. You are not your thoughts and emotions, and most especially thoughts, because most people just elaborate on the emotions part. Minding the gap, essentially. You have to mind the gap between, oh, this is just a thought that popped up in my head. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true. The personal analogy for this is that if you have a train of thought, it's up to us whether or not we're to board those train of thoughts, you know, because some of them might lead to very dark places, childhood trauma boulevard or anxiety attack avenue. And again, I'm just gonna read an excerpt from here in which I say, any moment you're free to get off a train of thought. Maybe that route was built years ago by fear, insecurity, or one bad experience you've been carrying around ever since. The brain is loud, emotions can be stupid, but we're gonna spend the rest of our lives with these things. Might as well get used to being around them and perhaps even befriend them. And you know, to be friends would mean to be not tolerate them all the time, you know, just listen to them, you give them attention, but it's not like everything they say is hard truth. They're not reality. Number 6, your problems, your solutions. In a nutshell, I have made it a rule that in any situation in which I pick up an advice, whether it be from somebody I respect, idolize, whether it be from some podcast or book or even a close friend, I don't take it as advice, I take it as a suggestion. It's my problem and I only know the specifics of that problem. Other people can only do so much to put themselves in our shoes. You know, nobody can do that. I mean, they can try, but no one has a one-to-one projection of what you're going through right now. And even if they did have an idea as to what your circumstances are, they don't know your upbringing, they don't know your tendencies, they don't know your inherent qualities, and again, they don't know how you do things exactly the way you want them to be done. Let me put this in a PUBG analogy. So I used to be a PUBG mobile competitive player, and you'll actually see this time and time again in the lessons to come, where I would just bring up a hobby of mine from my personal life. Some of these lessons I picked up from the real world or like in a practical context. Going back, it's like PUBG, okay? A shotgun might be the meta right now. You know, the DBS is what everybody's using in the competitive scene right now. Statistically, it might even be the best weapon in the game. But if you're a mid-range player, like you're assigned the mid-range role in a team whose job is holding angles with a DMR, blindly following that meta might actually make you worse. And even worse than that, your team might be affected, because that's why we have roles, right? The shotgun isn't bad, it's just not built for the situation. That's why these days, as I said a while ago, I treat advice as a suggestion and not a commandment, something to test and not something to obey, because advice doesn't magically become true just because it's popular, old, sounds wise. Take every piece of advice with a grain of salt, no matter how sweetly delivered it is to you. Moving forward, especially as I go into my 20s, since I'll be networking a lot and talking to people who've made it, quote unquote, I'll see it so that I'm not checking whether an advice is true, I'm checking whether an advice is applicable to me. Because at the end of the day, it's my problems and therefore it requires my solution. We just fuck around and find out. It's all data gathering. You can't really count on anybody else to gather your data for you. Lesson number, where are we? 7? We're zooming back into something a little more practical and situational, and that being a mindset in which I call let them and so what. And I think the bare bones version of this is from my father, my dad, in which every time he catches me feeling shy or like feeling like the world is looking at me and judging me, he would just say, so what? The best example to this is holding up the line in a cashier, because you know, you're trying to get change from your bag and then it's like in the very bottom and people are like, you know, they're behind you. And especially for people in my course, like computer science, they tend to be very conscious or anxious of what people might think. And again, I'm not exempt from this. It took me a while to get out of this type of self-limiting thought process where, oh, I'm holding up the line, they might be mad, what if they judge me, or will they get pissed off, what if the guy in the back has an emergency, and I'm like holding up the line. But as my dad would say, and the PUBG mobile people would say, oh, let them, right? Like, just, you're your own thing. Like, how about you? Like, think about yourself too. You have just as much right to hold up the line as much as they do if they were in your situation, right? Let them judge the same way that I should be allowed to hold up the line in most cases, especially to those who are highly self-conscious. Just ask these two questions, you know, like, okay, the first one isn't really a question, it's a statement, and then the second part essentially ask, like, what can they do about it? Lesson number 8, updating frameworks and expiring operating systems. It's basically a lesson about change, and let's just say in the past year or two, I've been put in a circumstance in which I just don't have enough time nor energy to expand in order to like resist it, philosophize about it, or question it. And I guess that in itself is the best example as to what this lesson is all about, and that being there are certain principles, mindsets, or beliefs that we have had and might have worked and to great effect in the past that might need some updating, if not downright uninstalling because of circumstances. You can look into previous videos as to what these changes meant to me and how much it affected me. But yeah, I guess I have been more open and willing to embrace that certain principles of mine just don't apply today. Yesterday's problems required yesterday's solutions, but most people would think that it would also work today. I mean, it worked yesterday and it's just like one day apart. I do think that as the days pass by, it just, the day will arrive wherein, yeah, you just have to look at yourself and the things you believe in and, you know, evaluate a little. Is this thing that was pushing me before now holding me back? Lesson number 9, the boos are proportional to the applause, and this is basically a spin on a Mark Manson classic. When you try to get liked by everybody, you won't be loved by anybody. Example I can lay out here is my Filipino-based knowledge sharing channel, which is Balay. It's a TikTok. There's this thing called target audience. I know it sounds pretty simple, but I only ever really thought about it this deeply when I was writing this lesson down. The reason why there's a target audience in the first place is because, well, there's a non-target audience, meaning there is a certain population that won't like my videos in the same way that there will be a population that will like my videos. That's why it's called target audience and not audience. Somebody's just bound to not clap. If you're not willing to be on the receiving end of tomatoes being thrown from a stage, perhaps you're not deserving of the applause of an entire stadium. The people who walk away give meaning to the people who stay. And again, in a general sense, the moment you stand for something, somebody will stand against it. Whether it be content creation and the content you create, whether it be an opinion, a conviction, a belief, a philosophy, a religion, a political stance, as soon as you stand, it's almost inevitable that somebody's going to try and bring you down. The micro reveals the macro, or as the article title says, the little things tell on us. So this idea came to me first in the form of a verse from Luke. I shall read it here. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. That is Luke 16 verse 10. So this goes against my initial impression that what defines a person can be derived from their big dramatic moments, you know, like when the spotlight is on them and they're up on stage. That's when you truly know who this person really is. I'm actually starting to think that it's the opposite. It's actually the everyday behavior that they show that will be the defining reel or replay that will be played at the end of their life. And that also again includes myself. You know, most people wait for dramatic moments before deciding who someone really is. A betrayal, a breakup, a crisis, a zombie apocalypse. But character usually reveals itself long before any of that. It shows up in how someone treats a waiter, how they talk about people who aren't in the room, whether they keep promises nobody's forcing them to keep. Anybody can say they're loyal, humble, disciplined, and every other adjective you can think of. The interesting question is whether their everyday behavior agrees with that. I also started applying that to myself. The older I get, the more convinced I become that the big moments don't reveal character, they only magnify it. It's not about how much or how high we can step up during big moments, but it's also how we carry ourselves in the mundane, filler episodes that happen, such as this one.